He was sued for writing a banned novel, and he could have paid his way out. But he stayed in jail, valuing the novel more than his own life. It turns out that someone stole his novel and he beat them up. They framed him for plagiarism. It turns out Shawn wrote the original story in her honor. Shawn hadn't forgotten about Taylor all these years, but he never thought that Wilson would tell him about his secret. Taylor then realized that Wilson had lied when he said that Shawn had married and had children and had forgotten about her. In order to find the true owner of the novel, Taylor had the two men dictate an entire novel in a public courtroom. The plagiarist couldn't memorize the entire book, so he quickly gave up and confessed to the crime. The case was closed and Shawn was acquitted. In order to keep Taylor, Shawn pretends that his boat is being repaired and invites Taylor to stay and watch his show. But when Taylor asked Shawn why she hadn't gotten married after all these years, Shawn told her that she was the only one in her heart. She didn't realize that this man was so deeply in love with her. Taylor was dumbfounded for a moment. The evening was such a success that Shawn even received an invitation to perform in the Kyung dynasty. Servant Wilson invited Taylor to accompany him, but of course, Taylor didn't say yes. After the reception, Shawn saw his father. Taylor was partly responsible for his coming to the show because she had invited Shawn's father to come. Father and son made peace, and Shawn is back to being the noble son he once was. Shawn came to stay with her again before they parted ways, but Taylor said she'd be a fugitive again if she left city. But Taylor says she'll go back to being a fugitive once she leaves city, and that Shawn's old lady still lives in her hometown, so they'll recognize her if she goes back. Shawn knew Taylor wouldn't go with him, but he had to try. The next day, Shawn wakes up to find that Taylor has left city. Chay accelerated her plan while Taylor was away for a few months. She arranges for two people to come to the county courthouse and file a complaint. One said that her neighbor had defiled her sister, and the other explained that she was drunk and had entered the wrong room. When the scholar actually starts writing the complaint, she snatches Samuel's pen. Chay then takes Samuel to a tavern and demonstrates firsthand how people react when they are drunk. It turns out that the two people who reported to police in the daytime have their houses next to each other. It's easy for people to get confused when they're drunk. That's why he wasn't allowed to write a complaint during the day. After all, the two families have been neighbors for so many years. If they go to the authorities because of this small matter, they may not get along well in the future. Samuel admired Chay's intelligence, not realizing that the person who reported the case was an actor she hired to act. The next night, she does the same thing again, luring Samuel to the marketplace. Then she implied that the man who arranged it would push the cart up the slope. When Samuel came over, she intentionally loosened the cart. When the cart rolls down near Samuel, Chay pushes Samuel out of the way and gets hit by the cart himself. This fake act really gained Samuel's trust. When Taylor returns, he learns that she was injured while protecting Samuel and thanks her for her help. However, she didn't know that Taylor was stepping into the trap set by Chay. She even visited the ladies of the village hall for her wedding. But at night, Chay crept into the village hall. It turns out that her true identity is the daughter of Beek House. The Beek Houses were once a prominent city family, but they were exiled and fell into ruin. They have gone to great lengths to regain what is rightfully theirs. Soon the Beek House's plan is realized and Chay and Samuel are married. At the wedding, the ladies of the village hall were surprised to see the Beek House at the wedding, who hadn't been there in a long time. After the wedding, Taylor's heart is finally relieved. But Samuel came looking for her on the first day of the wedding. It turns out that they had agreed to tell her why her brother Simon ran away from home once they got married. Just then Samuel's new wife Chay sneaks up to the door just as Maxim walks by and surprises her away. In the evening, Mrs. Beek suddenly approaches the other ladies of the village hall and tells them to join forces to take down Taylor. Mrs. Beek has a plan in her hands. The next day, Samuel wakes up to find a cursed figurine in his bed, followed by a report that the court has found his brother's body. The village hall's wife is spreading the word that Taylor has lost her husband. Taylor brings Samuel to identify the body, but the body was so decomposed that it was impossible to tell what the victim looked like. The sheriff was not alarmed and had his subordinates bring out a bag. The bag was found on the victim's body, and her husband's name was embroidered on it. But Taylor insisted it wasn't her husband because there was no knife wound in his shoulder. Her husband had been a martial arts practitioner for years, but there were no calluses on the body's hands. But the magistrate tried to force her to confess. Samuel, as a scholar, stopped the magistrate from doing so. But the news seems to be spreading around the county. Everyone was looking at her differently. And by someone's design, even the voodoo doll that appeared in Samuel's bridal chamber was rumored. Taylor soon realizes that someone is trying to set her up. What she doesn't understand is what they're trying to do by making her a widow. Mrs. Lee, who is close to her, tells her that she saw someone from the Beek house at the wedding and to be careful. At night, Samuel said he would go to look for his brother in order to save Taylor's reputation. Gossip has been flying around the county. The powers that be at the village hall began to put pressure on him. Although he refutes everything he says, the only way to dispel the rumors is to find the brother. Although Taylor didn't approve of his departure, the next day he set out to find his brother. He took a boat to Yizo. He asked around with a missing persons notice, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack without any clues. One night, he passes by a tea stall and sees Shawn, who looks just like his brother. Although they look alike, Samuel knows that Shawn is not his brother, because he had seen Shawn a few years ago. From Shawn's servant, he learned that his brother had boarded a merchant ship bound for the Qing dynasty. So Samuel took the ship to the Qing dynasty and saw a figure that looked like his brother. But when he went after him, he realized he had the wrong man. He can only ask questions with the notice, but he can't find anything in the language. On the way back to the hotel, he accidentally met a Korean businessman. The man saw the photo on the notice and thought it looked like one of their construction workers. Samuel rushes to the construction site, where he sees his brother Simon. Taylor, while Chay is prying for information, reveals that the death of her slave Beek is related to the Beek house. As the eldest daughter of Beek house, Chay learns from the case file that her mother has been deceiving her. Her brother was exiled because he took the blame for her mother. When she went back to question her mother, she was surprised when she confessed. This shook her to the core, but her mother warned her that there was no turning back, whether she wanted to or not. Once Taylor finds out what she's done, she won't let her and the whole Beek house go. And she was forced to do it on the night of the festival. Because on the day of the festival, all the servants would be gone, and it was the perfect time. Chay looks at her brother's belongings in her hand and is filled with a lot of hesitation. At night, she had to break into Taylor's room with someone else. Hours later, Mrs. Beek waited anxiously for news, but was surprised when it was Taylor who walked into her room. It turns out that Cha had confessed her identity to Taylor out of a pang of conscience. Taylor knew that all this was arranged by Beek house. After Mrs. Lee told her about Mrs. Beek's presence at the wedding, she quietly arranged for her subordinates to investigate Beek house. After analyzing the information, it is not difficult to guess the motive behind Beek house's action. That's why Taylor intentionally talked to Chay about Xiao Bei that day. As she expected, Chay went to look up Beek's file. She recognized that Chay was just a tool for her mother's revenge. So she made a plan to let Cha continue to act according to her mother's wishes, and she sent the servants away on purpose. In fact, she has already notified the local authority and arranged for soldiers to be ambushed in the room. At night, Chay entered Taylor's room with the robbers his mother had arranged. Soldiers rushed out from a hidden room and took out all the robbers. When Mrs. Beek learns that all her planning has been completely destroyed, she goes mad and tries to strangle Taylor. For Chay's sake, Taylor told Mrs. Beek to leave city and never come back. It was her last chance to give Beek house a chance. Chay was going to leave with her mother, but Taylor kept her. Because Chay is not a bad person, and what her parents did has nothing to do with her. Most importantly, Chay is now Samuel's wife. But the next day things took a sudden turn for the worse. The magistrate suddenly ordered the law firm to close down and burn all its files. The reason given by the magistrate was that widows can't be out in the open. From now on, she must stay at home and observe her husband's mourning for 3 years. And in front of her, he burned all the books of the law firm for the past few years. And Mrs. Beek stood across from her with a look of triumph on her face.